Hello, everyone. My name's Janakan. It's my first time in Bangalore. I'm very excited to be here with you. I've been to a couple of these, one Indigitous conference, but I've been to lots of these Campus Crusade conferences, and they're always really fun. So I'm glad you guys are here. I hope I can say something vaguely useful for you, but if not, then you can pretend to be interested. So I'm just going to talk for about half an hour, and then we can do question and answers. But I like being interrupted, so if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask, okay? So I'll introduce myself. Well, we're talking about social evangelism today. I'm from a Sri Lankan family. My parents are Sri Lankan. They grew up in Sri Lanka. That's my mum and my dad, with myself and my sister. I was cute back then. But I grew up in Hong Kong. My parents brought me up as a Hindu, and then I became Christian with my sister when I was about 14. So this is what I looked like when I was 14. You can't see me, so then you can spot the only brown guy. This is me growing up in Hong Kong. What I currently do is I run a startup tech company in Hong Kong, and we have 6 employees, and we have 2 staff in Singapore as well. If you ask what we do, it's quite difficult to explain, but the easiest way to explain it is that we make things go viral, okay? I used to say that what we did was make apps, but actually we do a lot of stuff alongside making apps, and the making apps is probably the easiest part of what we do. Making it spread is the hardest, okay? So that's what I like to think I'm an expert on. Whether or not I am is up to you. Our biggest achievement so far has probably been this app called Social Interview, which I launched in 2009. It doesn't exist anymore, so don't bother trying to download it. But we reached 50 million users worldwide, and it was used about 2 billion times. So it was just a very simple question and answer game which got people to answer questions about their friends. So for example, it would ask you, what's your favorite thing about Matthew? And do you think Simon has cool hair? Okay. Yes. And where it came from was actually a game we were playing in youth group where we were trying to figure out ways to get young people to be nice to each other. And so we came up with this game where we would ask them questions and they would have to say nice things about their friends. And then we were having so much fun, we decided to turn it into this app, and we did, and then it went viral. So at one point, it was the largest app on Facebook. We also do marketing on behalf of some pretty big firms. So we've worked with Coca-Cola, Disney, Starbucks, etc. And my personal claim to fame is that at the moment, I currently have more likes than the Indian president. Okay, so maybe I should run the country. But unfortunately, I have way less than the Prime Minister. Last thing about me, I'm 30, I'm currently engaged, this is my fiance, and we're going to get married in June. I'm very excited. So, yeah, so that's me. And what I'm here today to talk about is social evangelism, or how do we reach people using social media. Now, a lot of what I'm going to say is probably stuff you already know, but it's good to go over it anyway. So, I like this slide. I don't know whether you can see it. This is how many of you have seen this picture before? So this is a picture. It's actually a few years old, but it's a picture of the connections on Facebook. So who's friends with who? And I like it because it illustrates like the global connectivity. But Facebook has 1.4 billion people, 1.4 billion users. So if it was a country, it would be the largest country in the world. Nowadays, that's pretty obvious, but a few years ago, people would come up to me and ask, is Facebook going to go away? Why do we need to care about Facebook as Christians if it's just going to die? And the answer for me is that this is a place where people are. Okay, it's a virtual space, but Facebook, Google+, all these kind of social media sites are places where people are choosing to spend their time, and it's where they're choosing to find community. And this is something I'll come back to a few times, is that the reason social media is not going away is that it's where people go for community. And community is very hardwired into our hearts by God's design. So, yeah. And I've done some statistics. As I said, we have about 100 million users across our apps. And so we can do some pretty cool analysis on how people interact with each other. And what we found, at least among US, UK, New Zealand, Australian users, which is most of our users are in the English-speaking world, 95% of people have at least one significant Christian friend. Okay, and when I say significant, I mean that they are in their top 50 friends in terms of interaction. Okay, now most people have a meaningful social circle of about 150 people that they interact with, which means that the vast majority of people are connected with Christians. Okay? And I'll come back to why that's relevant. A couple stats about India, and you guys probably all know this better than I do. I found these statistics on a site called We Social. And so there's 243 million people using the internet in India. And on average, they're online or connected for about 5 hours a day. Now, what's interesting is that this number dwarfs other countries. So although the percentage of people connected in India is relatively low, the amount of time they spend online is much higher than other countries. And on average, people who do have social media accounts, which is about 100 million people, are active on it for about 2 hours a day. This is much, much higher than other countries. It's also a very mobile-centric country, as I'm sure you again all know. So 70% of web traffic is through mobile devices. There's a lot more mobile subscriptions than people, which I was surprised by. And the vast majority of people are using prepaid feature phones. Okay, so when we're thinking about how we use social media, we should be thinking about Facebook and Google Plus and Twitter and things, but we also should be thinking about the vast majority of people that have basic feature phones. My next slide is actually about China, but I found it very interesting. And I've called it the hungry generation. Now, basically, someone's done some cool research into how much different things are talked about on a social media platform in China called Weibo. Okay, now I know that India is a little different, but I found it really interesting, so I wanted to share. So it compares things which are faith-related versus things which are supposedly very popular in communist China. So the Bible is mentioned 17 million times, compared with the book Quotations of Chairman Mao, which is discussed 60,000 times. The words for Christian congregation show up 42 million times, compared with discussions about the Communist Party, which is 5 million times. Jesus is mentioned 18 million times, compared with the Chinese president, who's mentioned 4 million times. Christmas is mentioned 3 times more than the National Day, and God receives a lot more discussion than Mao, the founder of the country. Now, I found this really interesting, and what it tells me is that there is a large number of people using social media to find out about faith and to discuss faith, and I'm sure it's the same here. Okay, any questions so far? You're looking at me very politely. So I just did some brainstorming about if I was here and if I was trying to share the gospel using digital media, what are 3 ways that I would do it? Okay, and the 3 I'm going to talk about, one is SMS marketing or SMS outreach. A second is using ads or using promoted content. And the third, which is the most interesting and the most important, is social mission. Okay, now, I'm sure many of you have already thought about all of this and thought about it more than me, but I'll share it anyway. So SMS evangelism. Now, something which I would love to do, or love to try, is a very simple website or app where somehow we obtain a list of people's SMS phone numbers. Okay, now as we discussed, there's 900 million of them. Actually, this is not that difficult to do. If we can build an app with Android, or just using Google Plus login. It's very, very easy. I can write it in about 10 minutes to write a site where you can log in and give us access to your friends' phone numbers. Okay? And then we can send these people SMS messages which create a spiritual conversation. Okay, and I'll give you an example of that in a minute. And then we can allow people to respond simply by responding by SMS. They can reply to the SMS, or they can, if they don't want to spend the money, they can just do a missed call. And then we can follow up with these people. I'm not sure if this has been done, but I thought it was a cool idea. Now, why would you use this? Well, if you're like me, you might have friends that you want to share the gospel with, but actually you're too scared to share it directly with them. Okay? And I'm sure this is quite a common thing in South Asia. Now, if you could do this thing where you can basically say that you want to reach these friends, and then have messages sent, 1 or 2 messages sent from this platform to these people, then it's a way to share the gospel with them without having to do it yourself. Okay? And what you could do is then you could just send, the app could send the recipients of this 1 message or 2 messages, which just says something like, do you need prayer? Reply or miscall this number, and we would love to pray with you. Okay? It's very simple, it's extremely cheap to run, and it potentially creates all these, leads, all these opportunities to share the gospel with people. And what this does is it overcomes one of the biggest barriers, which I'll talk about, which is the social barrier, the fear of rejection that comes with sharing the gospel. And the fear of rejection is very strong in Asia. We really don't like being rejected. We really don't like being hurt. I've just put this picture in. I don't know if you can see it properly. That's Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, and he was in India, I think, a couple of weeks ago to launch Internet.org. How many of you have heard of Internet.org? So quite a few. So there's a lot of, what it basically is a way for people to gain access to information from feature phones. And so there's a lot of movement in this area, and I think we spend a lot of time thinking about Facebook and Google Plus and Twitter, and I think there's still billions of people who only have access to very simple phones. And the great thing about SMS is this is a very simple thing that we can implement. We could probably build it by the end of tomorrow if there's people who want to do it. Any questions about that? Okay, a second strategy to think about is promoted content. Now, I've called it promoted content for a reason. Now, what do I mean by content? There's a lot of people, when I go and speak at these kind of conferences, there's a lot of people thinking about content. So they think about and they make websites, or they make YouTube videos, or they write blogs. And they consistently come to me with the question, I've made all this stuff, but no one's ever seen it. Okay, so people invest a lot of time into creating great content. Now, basically, there's 3 things you need for content to be successful. You need traffic, you need content, and you need a follow-up strategy. And what I find consistently is that Christians always focus on the content only, and they don't think hard enough about how am I going to get people to see this, and what am I going to do with them once they've seen it. So I put this slide in to really encourage you that if you are spending time creating websites or creating blogs or creating anything, if you're not thinking about the traffic and you're not thinking about the follow-up, then you're wasting your time. Okay? Now, there's basically lots of ways to get traffic. Okay? One of them is to do things like have a Facebook page and have a Twitter account. The reality is, 5 years ago, I would have said that's a great idea. Now I would tell you it's a complete waste of your time. This is a harsh thing to say, but if you are investing a lot of time maintaining a Facebook page, you're wasting your time. Because the visibility on Facebook pages, on Twitter accounts, on all of these things is in aggressive decline, and that's not going to change. The reason it's in aggressive decline is that the amount of content available for a person to see roughly doubles every year, or every 2 years. Which means that for any person who opens their Facebook or their Google account, the amount of posts they could potentially see at the moment stands at about 2,000 posts a day. So their friends, the things they follow, adds up to about 2,000 posts a day. Of those 2,000, they will usually only see about 100. Which means that if you post something and you have 100,000 followers, at the moment you're doing well if 5% of them see it. Okay? But that number is dropping very quickly because Facebook, Twitter, all of these websites have algorithms that prioritize ordinary people posts over fan page posts. Because that's what people really want to see. If you're on Facebook, you're more interested in the new picture of your friend's baby than you are in seeing an update from a page you liked. So the truth is, if you're investing lots of time in a Facebook page, Twitter account, etc., you're wasting your time. So how do you get traffic then? Well, the truth is, you either do a lot of search engine optimization or you spend money on ads. Okay? If you don't want to do either, then we'll talk about social strategies in a minute. But ads can be very effective. Just before I came here, I did a search for who is Jesus upstairs in my hotel room. And as you can see, there's already a lot of people advertising stuff about who is Jesus. Okay? So there's Christian websites that are running ads for who is Jesus. Okay? The problem is they're all American. Now, I love my American friends, but if you are in Bangalore searching for something about who is Jesus, we need to be connecting you with local resources and with local people that can actually follow up with you and disciple you. You don't need to be connected with a website on the other side of the world. Okay? We live in a virtual world, but what we really want to do is get people off the virtual platforms and into real life fellowships. Okay? So I would love to see, at the end of this conference or sometime in the future, really great local resources that we can go and buy ads for and promote it and see what happens. Now the truth is, the ads don't cost that much. So I just did a quick check for the key phrase Jesus Christ in Hindi, and at the moment the pricing per click is about 1 rupee. Okay, so it's a few US cents. Now that's very, very low. Now I understand that a lot of organizations don't have money, and so they can't really afford to go and spend lots of money on ads. But if you have great resources and you want to promote it, then come and talk to me, come and talk to us, and I'm sure we can find a way to get it funded. Okay? Because I think it's really silly that we're sending all these people to American websites where they're not going to get good local follow-up. Okay? Another great advertising platform is YouTube. Okay? So again, I did a quick check, and it says that for 100 US dollars, you should get between 3 and 10,000 views. Okay? Now, you only pay for these sponsored YouTube ads. You only pay if someone actually watches the whole video. Okay? So actually, this is very, very cheap. It's much cheaper than other countries. So if we could create great evangelistic videos and just run it, and you can target very specifics, you can target like a specific part of Bangalore with these ads, then it's a pretty effective strategy. Again, it currently costs about 1 rupee per view. So you can get someone to watch an evangelistic video for not very much. Now, a couple of case studies just to look at. How many of you have heard of Every Student? So it's a Campus Crusade website, I think. And from what I understand, they run all these ads, people come to the website, and then they follow up. Now, from what I understand, it's pretty effective. One of the reasons it's effective is because they have, as I said, a follow-up strategy. So after you read through an article, there's a very prominent way to connect with them. And as I said, this is the 2 biggest weaknesses with Christian content. The first is people aren't thinking, how do I get traffic? And the second is they don't have a follow-up strategy. So this is another area that I would love to see innovation in. Because if we can come up with a way with the churches in South Asia, where if someone reads an article online or watches a video online, there's a simple way for them to connect with a local church, wherever they are. So if we could get local churches excited about this, then it would be a much more meaningful discipleship process than just connecting them with someone on the other side of the world. Okay? Another great case study is this website called One for Israel. It's run by some of my Israeli friends, and what they do again is they run these ads and about key questions which Israelis are going to ask, and then they show these videos and they follow up by email and by phone. So if you've watched one of them and you want to respond, you want to communicate, then you can do. And they consistently get a lot of really, really powerful stories. And the truth is, the reason they succeed is because they've got good ads, they've got great content, and most of all, they've got a great follow-up strategy. Okay? Any questions? Okay, now the last thing I'm going to talk about is social mission. And what I mean by social mission is how do we get ordinary people to share the gospel with their friends? Okay, now this is, to be honest, what I'm most excited about, so I might go on for a bit. Now, to explain this, can you see the dots? Yeah, you can. So I want to talk about the difference between P2P and broadcast. Now, this is quite a technical concept, but I find it interesting. So when you're broadcasting something, say that I'm a website, I have a resource you want, say a video, and anybody in this room who wants it has to connect with me. Okay? And this is basically what it looks like. Can you see the lines? So you've got one person who's pushing out content or pushing out information to hundreds of people. Okay? Now, both the strategies I talked about before, and most of what I hear about when it comes to Christian evangelism online, looks like this. So you've got a few people, usually prominent church leaders or Campus Crusade ministries or whatever, creating content and attempting to push it out to lots and lots of people. Okay? Now, there's two major problems with it. The first is the person in the middle gets tired and does a bad job. Okay, so not to discourage anyone, but I just heard about a story about how an organization's got 140,000 people signed up who want to receive a book, and they haven't been able to deliver it. Now, this is common. If you are trying to reach out to lots of people, you're not going to do a very good job. There's a second problem, which is what I talked about before, which is that if you are, sorry, just to explain my diagram, the red people are Christians, and the gray people are non-believers. Okay? Now, if we take this non-believer on the right-hand side, who's got a circle around him, can you all see that? That is his sphere of attention. So, online, the reality is most of what he hears about is from people who are very close to him. And as the amount of content on social media networks increases, that circle becomes smaller and smaller. Because Facebook, Twitter, all of them know that they cannot show you posts from everyone that you're connected to. So people increasingly only see content from people they're very, very close to on social media. So it's a bit of a fail situation to have this model where we've got one or two organizations, pushing out content and trying to reach the masses. It does work, and I do think that the SMS strategy can work, and the advertising strategy can work. But basically, to push into someone else's sphere of influence, you now have to pay. Okay, it's very, very difficult to get people to pay attention to you if you're not paying money. So, what is better than this kind of broadcast model is a P2P model, which is basically where you get friends evangelizing to friends. Okay? Now, this is something which has been obvious in the offline world forever. Okay? Everybody knows that friends reaching out to friends works better usually and results in more meaningful growth than a central speaker doing a mass rally. Okay? You can get quick conversions with mass rallies, but you don't get real discipleship. And it's the same thing in the offline world. So the question is, how do we get this person to reach out to their friend? Okay? And how do we equip them to do that? And this is the million-dollar question. Because, as I said in the beginning, nearly everybody on Facebook, nearly everybody on Google Plus is actually already connected with a Christian. So, if you think about it, we are, as the church, the global church, is very, very well positioned to share the gospel. Okay? Now, one thing to think about as we think about this problem is the difference between what I call bubbles and bridges. Okay? So bubbles, I've just made this up, so it's not, don't go and Google this terminology because I don't think anyone else has used it. So bubbles are Christians who live in bubbles. Okay? Now, unfortunately, the truth is most of us are probably bubbles. So, especially if you work in ministry, your social circle is probably largely Christian. Okay? And if it's not largely Christian, it's because you make a really, really significant effort to get out there. Okay? But a lot of people, a lot of Christians live in these bubbles. And the bubbles are the people in red at the bottom right. Okay? And then the bridges are the people in yellow. Now, they are the people who have a large number of non-Christian friends. Now, the challenge we have is that it's actually very easy to get bubbles to share evangelistic content. Okay? And the reason it's very easy is because they live in environments where they get social reinforcement, they get likes, they get encouragement for sharing stuff, for sharing their testimony, for sharing Christian content. Now, the problem is, based on my very simple statistical analysis, people who live in bubbles have a reach of about 12% of the world. Okay? So if all we do is educate ourselves on how to reach our friends, we're not doing a very good job. If you can turn the bridges into effective social media evangelists, then you get to 85% reach across the world. Okay? So our challenge is to really understand, not ourselves who live in these bubbles, but to understand the people, especially new Christians, who may be relatively isolated, and understand how we're going to help them. What are the actual challenges facing them that prevent them from sharing the gospel, both in real life and online? Okay? And just to reiterate the difference between bubbles and bridges, bubbles mostly have Christian friends. They get a lot of social reinforcement for sharing anything Christian, and their Christian worldview is generally accepted. Bridges often have mostly non-Christian friends. They experience social rejection when sharing Christ, and their worldview is consistently challenged. Okay, now this can be in the West, this can be in the East, this can be everywhere. If you're a scientist, for example, there's the belief in God. If you believe strongly in God, you can experience a lot of rejection in your professional life. You're a bridge. Okay? And as a general rule, the harder it is for you to share the gospel, the more effective you actually can be. Okay? So we really have to get ourselves into the minds of the people who don't live in bubbles. Now, basically, what I'm going to do is give you a few things, and this is what I would do with someone who wanted to learn how to use their personal social media presence more effectively for the gospel. The first thing I would tell them is to remember that it's difficult. And I've just put a Bible verse in there: whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Now, the reality is, if you're a bridge and you want to reach your friends for Christ, you're going to get hurt. Okay? And you're going to get hurt whether you do it in the real world or whether you do it in the social media world. And you're going to experience rejection. And it's going to be hard. And I would be lying if I told you it's not. Okay? But Jesus has encouraged us. Now, basically, there's 4 or 5 steps that I would suggest you do. And they're all very, very simple. The first thing, before you try and become an online evangelist, is try and understand. Okay? And what I do, and this is something we do in our company, is we do something called the newsfeed test. And what we do is we open up Facebook and we look at every single post and we ask ourselves, what motivated this person to share this particular post? Okay, whether it's an article or a picture or a joke, whatever. And what you will consistently find is that the main reason people share anything is because they want to say, please notice that I'm funny, interesting, beautiful, and worthy of love. Okay? The primary reason anyone shares anything online is for that reason. And that is not a bad thing. That is the way that God created us. Okay? Now, of course, this is expressed in different ways for different demographics. I've told this before many times, but it still fascinates me. Men, especially young men, post an overwhelming number of article links, especially funny article links. Okay? And that's because, in general, men are valued for being funny and for appearing intelligent and for all these kind of things. Okay? I'm not trying to be sexist, this is what the numbers show. Something like 90% of photos on Facebook are shared by women. Okay, why? Because we live in a culture which overwhelmingly values women for looking good. So, although there's many different types of posts, the primary reason anyone is active on social media, we like to think it's to get information, and a little bit of it is to get information, but overwhelmingly, people are active on social media because they want to be loved. Okay? And the more you understand this, the more you realize that sharing Christ with them is not pushing something in their face, it's meeting one of their deepest needs. Okay? And not just sharing Christ with them, but being a good friend to them and loving them and interacting with them. It's not a waste of time. This is something I hear a lot, it's a waste of time to be online, you should be in the real world. Well, that is ignoring people where they are in need. Okay, and I like this Bible verse as well. It's from Matthew when thousands of people are hungry and they don't have anything to eat. And the disciples say, send them away so they can go and get food. And Jesus says, they do not need to go away, you give them something to eat. Okay? So if we've got billions and billions of people seeking relationship and seeking community online, we don't need to send them away. We need to go to them and meet those needs. Okay? So the first thing I would encourage people to do before they do anything is spend time just looking at what your friends are posting, non-judgmentally, and asking yourself, what is the heart behind this? The second thing to do, of course, is to pray. And I've tried to make prayer apps before, it didn't really work. But one thing I would encourage you to do if you really want to get into online evangelism is to do a newsfeed prayer walk. So just open up your newsfeed and pray for the first 3 people on it. Okay, whoever they are. Now, if you do this for a week or a month, even without trying to do any kind of evangelism, what will happen is that your heart will start to melt and your heart will be open to people. And I believe the Holy Spirit will start to lead you on who to talk to and what to do and what to say. And that will be far more useful than any tips or tricks that I can teach you. Okay? So if we could get millions of Christians praying for their friends on Facebook, I think that will change the way we do evangelism. And it doesn't have to be much. You can do it like for 2 minutes a day or 1 minute a day. And one thing I've said before is I can't remember where I was, but I was in some campus ministry where they were really trying really hard to get their student members to go out and evangelize on the streets. And I said, that's a good thing to do, but you're working so hard to try and get your students to go out and evangelize for like half an hour a month. Whereas in reality, they're spending an hour a day on Facebook. So if you can get them to see that hour a day as an opportunity to minister to their friends, then you're going to do way more impact. So after praying, the third thing is to learn. And this is especially true for people who are bridges, not in bubbles. Okay? Because when we live in bubbles, it's easy for us to ignore the incredible negativity that comes when you try and share the gospel. So I love Ravi Zacharias. I'm sure lots of you do too. But I've just really found reading these books and understanding that having a belief in God, for example, is not stupid. And actually there's some great scientific evidence behind it. These kind of things really empower me to go out and share the gospel with my friends. And this really needs to be part of discipling someone to be an online evangelist. We need to teach them to understand, we need to teach them to pray, and we need to teach them the basics of why they believe. Okay? Because they will be questioned about it. And only after doing that would I encourage people to start thinking about sharing the gospel. Okay? And there's a few ways to do it, which I found work in different environments, and I'm just going to share those with you, and then I'm pretty much done. So one is offering to pray. Very, very few people will reject an offer of prayer. So I found it to be one of the easiest ways to build a relationship. People on Facebook and Twitter will tell you everything. Okay, so it's very, very interesting. Like, it's a very easy way to see which of your friends are in need, and then offer to pray. Using photos, using your life story, using music, using Bible verses, I'll talk about a little more detail. Now, these are deliberately simple things. Okay, I haven't created or I haven't come up with ideas that require a special app. These are just simple things which anybody can do. And the reason for that is because that's what we need. Is we need millions of people doing simple things that they can do. One thing that you can do, which is very low key, is using photos. Okay? Now, this is a photo of my ministry group in Hong Kong, and we're all sitting around and eating food. Okay? Now, what I found is in a lot of closed countries, posting photos of your ministry group, as long as it's not going to get people killed, is a very, very good thing. Especially if the photos are of people eating food and looking happy. Okay? Because what we often forget as Christians is that a lot of non-Christians have no idea what we do in ministry, or what we do at church, or what we do in small groups. For us, it's obvious. For them, they don't have a clue. Okay? In the same way that I don't really know what Muslims do when they pray. I kind of do, but I don't really. So having photos of your ministry and where you can see that people are having fun and people are interacting, that there's social engagement, is a very powerful draw, especially in student circles and in young people circles. Because if there's two things that young people are looking for, one is free food, and the second is community. Okay? And community is the big drive, as I said. So posting photos is a very, very simple and non-threatening thing you can do. Another simple and non-threatening, relatively non-threatening thing you can do is to share your testimony, but not necessarily to share your testimony and call it, "This is my testimony." Okay? Obviously, if you have the confidence to go out and share your testimony, great. But as I said, what I'm interested in is how do we raise up the bridges? And a lot of them are not going to be comfortable just posting online and saying, "This is my testimony." Right? So this is something which I've done, which is I post a list of random silly things that I've done and random stuff that's happened to me through my life. Okay? Now, if you went and read the whole post, you would see that a significant amount of it is faith-related. So, I'll talk about how I met Christ and how I got baptized and how this happened and how that happened. But it's mixed in with a whole bunch of other stuff, which makes it feel more like me telling my life story and less like me just trying to sell you something. Okay? And basically, this fits in with the norm of Facebook, because on Facebook, people are telling their life story. I mean, that's the whole point of it. You're telling your life story, and you're telling the story of your relationships. Every time you post a photo of you with your friends, you're telling a story of you with your relationships. So if you can make it natural to share your faith as part of that story, it leads to conversations. So this particular note I did, maybe about 10 or 15% of it was faith-related, but I got maybe 3 or 4 of my friends asking me about those bits. Okay? And it just worked. Another relatively non-threatening thing to do is to share music. Okay? Now this is David Crowder. How many of you know David Crowder? Lots of people. So I have a few fan pages from our apps they have about 10 million fans. And if we post evangelistic content, people get very upset because we're a games fan page, so why are we posting evangelistic content? But we posted links to the song, How He Loves Us, by David Crowder. And what we found is that a whole bunch of people, we had about 150,000 people go and listen to it. And a whole bunch of people liked it and downloaded it onto their iPods. Probably illegally, but oh well. So a whole bunch of people went and downloaded the song. And then we kept getting messages for about a week or 2 weeks afterwards from people going, oh, I really like that song you posted, but I don't understand it. Okay? So we basically had an opening to share the gospel through great music. And of course, sharing Bible verses. Okay, now we're getting into the harder, more direct things, but Bible verses can work. Okay, now the experience of sharing a Bible verse, if you are a bridge, is very different from the experience of sharing a Bible verse if you live in a bubble. If you live in a bubble, you get lots and lots of positive reinforcement. Everyone likes it and says, yes, praise the Lord, amen. Okay. When I posted this, I think I lived kind of halfway between a bubble and a bridge. One of my friends wrote as the first comment, seems a bit narcissistic to me. Okay? So they immediately were challenging it, and that's very common. Now, I went and messaged her and started talking to her, and I was like, just trying to understand why she thought it was narcissistic. The Bible verses, we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who've been called according to His purpose. And she started sharing more, and she started sharing what was going on in her life, and it basically created an opportunity. Okay? Now, that's what God promises us, is that His word is a double-edged sword which does not return empty. So we know that if you share Bible verses, it probably will make a difference. But if you're a bridge, if you live in an environment where you're not constantly reinforced in your faith, then you will get negative reactions. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about, just sharing a few of the ideas. But if there's one thing I want us to take away and think about more, it's how do we equip these bridges? How do we equip the people who have significant numbers of non-Christian friends to become great online evangelists? Because to be honest, the pieces are all there. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of Christians online, okay? And they are spending hours a day on social media interacting with their non-Christian friends. We don't have to go out anywhere, okay? We don't have to like pester people who don't want to hear about the gospel. What we need to do is we need to equip them and enable them to become better at it. And 2 final thoughts as I was praying about this and thinking about this. And this is a reflection for me. I've been quite involved with the church in Sri Lanka. I don't know what the church in India is like, but if there's 2 things I'd like to see more, the first is let young people do more. So in Sri Lanka, there's a bit of a culture where there's a respect culture where we always have to listen to our elders, and in general, that's a good thing. But when it comes to social media, what I found is that young people come up with stuff that is way more brilliant than older people. So a lot of my most viral ideas, I basically stole them from the 15 and 16-year-olds at my youth group. Okay? So we need to find a way to, because these are the people who understand it inside out. We don't necessarily. And they understand how people are going to respond intuitively. So find a way to equip your young people and let them make decisions and let them try stuff. And the second thing is fail often. I think in Sri Lanka, we're very afraid of failing. And the reality is everything which is successful online, everything which is successful in social media, has a policy of failing often, which means you do stuff and you expect it not to work. But giving yourself that freedom to fail is what allows you to come up with new innovative stuff. So those are my cultural challenges. That's pretty much all I have. I'm very happy to take any questions now, or we can chat more over the next couple of days.